I said, just to get started, I want to make sure I let you all know that if you have any questions, so please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen or at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can pop any of those questions in there and we'll be sure to answer them at the conclusion of our session today. And if questions are indeed answered while the session is occurring, we will say it was resolved or it was answered live. So stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I would also like to thank our sponsors, Corning and Google Fiber, for supporting this effort and continue to support our efforts for our Stand Against Racism. If you didn't know, this month is Stand Against Racism Month. And during this month, which occurs annually throughout all different YWCAs across the country, it's an opportunity for us to raise awareness about some of the systemic and institutional racism happening in our country today and ways in which we should be combating it and coming together as a community, kind of think about those issues and talk about different solutions for those things. So this is a great opportunity for people to get locked in and get engaged with our YWCA and really get connected to our mission like we try to do year round. But this is a really important month for that. And this amazing session that we'll be holding today will be on living wage, which is a topic that's very near and dear to our mission. When we think about equity and we think about socioeconomic status, we think of those different things. We think about ways in which people can have the opportunity to get paid fairly enough and paid enough so that they're able to take on different responsibilities that they may have while in certain communities. So we think about Charlotte as a growing community, and we know like the rates and the rent prices are through the roof and they're ridiculous. And you wonder sometimes, how could somebody afford to live, raise a family, eat in Charlotte, knowing that the cost of living here is so high? So we're going to be talking with Vicki today from Just Economics. I'm so excited that she's here to have this conversation with us. And I'm going to read her bio so you get an idea of who Vicki is. So Vicki is the executive director of Just Economics, and she came to Just Economics with a background in community organizing. She has worked on environmental, social, and economic justice issues ranging from responsible oil and gas drilling to protecting health and human services in the Ohio state budget. In 2006, Vicki worked with Let Justice Roll and Cleveland Jobs with Justice on the successful campaign to raise the state minimum wage, and continue to work with Jobs with Justice on the, I'm going to say this name wrong, I'm scared.
Cuyahoga.
Cuyahoga, thank you so much. Cuyahoga County Living Wage Campaign and other worker justice issues. Since coming to Just Economics in 2010, Vicki has led the organization to grow the largest voluntary living wage certification program in the country, win major victories in expanding transit services by organizing with bus riders, successfully advocate for responsible local public policy, and organize with people most impacted by the issues Just Economics works to change. Vicki leads the National Living Wage Network and serves as a leader in local and statewide coalitions. Vicki has a strong commitment to and passion for economic justice work and has been involved in a variety of community activities. Vicki has a daughter in college and has lived in West Asheville since 2007. When she is not at work, she enjoys time at Lake Montana or meeting up with friends for conversation, games, or adventure. I like the adventure part. That's my favorite part. So everyone, let's welcome Vicki, and you guys can do a virtual round of applause from your seats for Vicki. So I'm going to hand it over to her. Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you so much, Jamila. I really appreciate y'all inviting me to join you tonight, and I'm excited about the interest in this topic. Tonight, I'm going to give you a little bit more background on me and the work that we're doing at Just Economics, and I'm going to kind of speed through that rather quickly, but I want you to have a little bit of an understanding of where we're coming from. Then I'm going to begin to talk about living wages, and then we're going to do an exercise that I think helps us to illustrate why we work for living wages. And then we'll do some more on living wages and how that relates to racial and gender equity, and talk about ways that folks can take action. And then from there, we'll open it up for some more questions. So again, I really appreciate Jamila's introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. And you heard my bio. And the only thing that I'll just add to that is that, when I moved to Asheville in 2007, I moved here as a single parent that was waiting tables and living below the poverty line. And I really appreciate the fact that Just Economics kind of valued my lived experience to move into this role, and it fits with the values of Just Economics that we really value lived experience. I'm going to share my screen and get started on some things here. All right. So tonight, again, we're going to be talking about living wages. And my organization is called Just Economics, and we are based in Asheville, but serve Western North Carolina. Our mission is to educate, advocate, and organize for a more just and sustainable local economy that works for all in Western North Carolina, because we know that our current economy does not work for all. We believe at Just Economics in centering people most impacted by the issues that we work to change. We believe that people closest to the problems are also closest to the solutions. We believe in shared community prosperity, economic justice, and interdependent economies, really recognizing how we're dependent on each other, and breaking away from traditional narratives of power in our communities and workplaces. At Just Economics, we work on policy advocacy. This is how we intersect with the public sector. We've worked on policy advocacy as it relates to living wages and better working conditions, affordable housing, and better transit. We also work with grassroots education and engagement. We have various programs to make sure that we're continuing to lift up the lived experiences of individuals closest to the problems associated with economic injustice in our community. And we have, like Jamila mentioned, the largest voluntary living wage employer certification program in the country. And we are connected actually internationally with folks around the globe that have certification programs. So I wanted to share some of the challenges that exist in our community that I think are similar to those in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. There is a high cost of living in Asheville and Buncombe County disproportionate to wages. I think that's very true in Buncombe County and Asheville, but I think that's also true in Charlotte, and we've seen the impacts of the pandemic on that. Across the country, we've seen growing economic inequality when we think about like who has actually financially benefited from the economic situation of the pandemic. There is a lot of benefit up at the top, and who has been harmed or hurt the most from the economy coming out of this pandemic. I should knock on something, but during this pandemic, and it's the people in the middle and the bottom. This is a right to work state in North Carolina, so we have few outlets for workers to advocate for themselves. And then in the South, we have this legacy of institutional racism. Of course, there's that all over the country, but I think there's, Southern institutional racism is a thing. And we have additional statewide legislative challenges. I always say that this is a hard state to be a renter or a worker, and many of us are both. And so some of the same challenges that we're facing in Buncombe County and in Western North Carolina, I think y'all are facing in Charlotte and Mecklenburg as well. So real quick, how do we define a living wage? I define a living wage as saying the minimum amount that a worker must earn to afford their basic needs without public or private assistance. And when we look at a living wage, it's important to understand that, I'm going to talk a little bit about our living wage certification program and a living wage rate. And that has to kind of be the same no matter what your family size is or whatnot. However, when we think about the concept of a living wage, that's different based on your family size, based on your geographic location, and all of that, because it takes different amounts of money to afford those basic needs depending on how many people are in your family, and where you live. We look at our living wage rates that we have as part of our certification program and some of the policy work that we've done as a better starting place, a more just minimum than the minimum wage, which has not gone up since 2009, y'all, 2009. Think about what your housing costs were in 2009 and what they are now, and realize that we are still at $7.25 an hour. And it's important to note that when a worker makes a living wage, they have new opportunities for economic mobility. When you are making below a living wage and not able to afford those basic needs without some type of assistance, public or private assistance, or creative solutions to your economic challenges, you're often having to work 2, 3 jobs just to get by. And that doesn't allow a lot of time for training and development, or going back to school, or, or taking care of yourself that can lead to advancing economically. Okay, y'all, we're gonna do an exercise, and Jamila is gonna help me out with this. And so I pulled some numbers for Mecklenburg County. But what I want you to do is imagine that you are one adult with a toddler-age child in your household. And we're going to go through these various expenses. And then I'd love you to pop into the chat your guess on what some of these costs are. And when we're thinking about costs, I want you to think about modest but realistic, not those outliers. We all know somebody who got a great deal or somebody who's paying way too much. So, but just think about kind of that middle of the road, modest but realistic monthly expenses. You're trying to be economically savvy, but what's realistic. So we're going to start with housing. So I want you to write in, what do you think are your monthly housing expenses? This is likely for rent and some basic utilities that go along with housing. So, your light bill and gas and water, trash, that kind of thing. So what do you think is the monthly, we'll probably have a 2-bedroom apartment or something like that for one adult, one toddler in your household. And if you would pop those into the chat, I'm going to have Jamila help me out and read some of those off.
All right, so we have housing, $1,100, $1,300, $1,200 just for housing.
Cool. And you can keep those guesses coming. So just, again, thinking about housing and what that costs for 1 month. Think about your own housing expenses, how that might relate, what you might know about neighbors. So, if you have a mortgage or if you're paying rent and some basic utilities for housing. Yeah. Any other guesses?
$1,500. Somebody said $1,000. Somebody said $1,100. So we're getting a good range, between $1,000 and $1,500.
Okay.
And somebody actually said bare minimum $2,650 total.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Very specific.
All right, well, let's move on and talk about food. And y'all, sometimes people like to write these numbers down. If you have a pen and paper near you and you want to kind of do this exercise alongside us at home, you can do that. So feel free to do that. So what do you think food? So when we're talking about food, we're really going to talk about groceries. So think about, what is your monthly grocery bill? What would it be? How could you relate to, some of us might have one adult, one toddler in your household. What do we think are the monthly grocery bills?
All right, so we got a lot of folks popping up. For groceries, I see $250 to $300. Somebody said $350 minimum. And that's not taking into account if family needs to purchase like formula or things like that.
Right.
Someone said 400. Another person said between 250 and 350. Wow, up to $700. Someone has suggested.
And I know, like, since the pandemic and some inflation's happened, I feel like I am going to the grocery store once a week, and it's just me and my household, and I can never get out of there with less than $100. I mean, that's what it feels like. I might be off. Maybe I'm going every week and a half. I don't know, but yeah, those numbers have definitely seemed to have crept up a little bit, at least from my perspective, in the last 6 months or so. All right, you might know a little bit more about this for some folks that have childcare at home. I don't know what childcare looks like in Mecklenburg County. I know that here in Buncombe County, we are in a childcare crisis, and even people that have childcare vouchers don't have a place to use vouchers. But think about if you are a full-time worker and you need to have your child in regular childcare 5 days a week or something like that. What are the monthly expenses for childcare? And again, modest but realistic. Maybe we're not talking about the most expensive childcare facility, but we're talking about a modest and realistic childcare for your toddler.
It's crazy because Vicki, the moment you said childcare, like the chat started going crazy. It was like so many different.
Someone
Yes. So somebody said, I believe between $500 and $700 a month, $900 a month, $1,200 a month, $1,100 a month, $1,000, and another $1,000 a month. So it sounds like some folks are pretty in the know of what childcare is looking like in Mecklenburg County right now.
All right. So we're going to move on to healthcare. Again, feel free to keep track of this yourself for your own benefit. But we're going to move on to healthcare. And before we get some healthcare guesses, let me just tell you that I have been doing this exercise in Buncombe County since I started with Just Economics in 2010. And this is the only expense that has gone down since I initially started that. And that is because of the Affordable Care Act. Because as someone who is making the salary required to pay for these basic needs would qualify for healthcare on the marketplace. And so I know that it's not a perfect policy, but I just wanted to name that, the data that I've seen and that I'm going to show here in a minute, this is the only expense that has gone down since 2010. But when we're talking about healthcare, we're going to talk about, monthly insurance premiums and then your co-pays and things like that are averaged out over the whole year, right? Because, you're probably not going to the doctor every month, but, basic, and there's going to be some outliers. Some people have some conditions that make medicine more expensive, so medicine, co-pays, and health insurance. Some basic care. So what do we think are those monthly expenses for healthcare?
All right. So we have $180 a month. I think people are totaling stuff in their minds right now. So it's not as quick as the childcare right now.
Oh, I know childcare.
I know childcare. I know. $500 a month for healthcare. Okay. $500 between $250 and $400, $300. And yeah, like Vicki said, make sure you're kind of jotting down some of these numbers. If you have access to a pen and paper or your phone, jot this down. So 300, that was the last one. But I think people are still trying to do some figuring.
No worries. Yeah, I have I think I have a silver plan on the marketplace. My organization is too small to have a group plan. And I have one adult, one child. My child is not in childcare. She's at UNC Wilmington, but still cover her health care. And I think my health insurance is around $300 a month. Plus I pay a little bit more for copay. So it seems like a lot of your guesses were in line with my experience having one adult, one child in my household. And I also just named that, my child has a pre-existing condition. So Affordable Care Act, health insurance, when before I was making a living wage, she qualified for Medicaid, but then after I was making a living wage, her healthcare was too expensive. It was $800 a month for a high deductible health savings account. And our healthcare plan was don't get sick until the Affordable Care Act goes through. And, I'm privileged and lucky enough that worked, but healthcare has been a problem for a lot of people in our communities. All right, let's talk about transportation. So think about the monthly cost of transportation. And so we're talking about maybe like a car payment and gas and insurance. Obviously, gas has gone up in the past couple of months, so our numbers are going to be a little bit off from because they were data from a while ago. And if your car's paid off, you might think about what the monthly, averaging things like oil changes and repairs and stuff like that. So any thoughts on monthly costs for transportation?
Yes, so we have $250, $660. So that's a couple of coming in. And I don't know why I thought of some people may have a car that they have paid off already. So the costs may fluctuate, or even folks that take public transportation, you think about those things as factors. Those costs add up as well.
Yeah, and I don't know about how y'all are in Charlotte, Jamila, but here in Asheville, housing and transportation are really related, right? If you're paying a lower price for housing, you are living much further out of the city and away from work. So your transportation, your gas prices, the wear and tear on your car, your insurance is all higher. Whereas if you're living closer into the city and you can take public transportation, a lot of places that we have in Asheville, your housing prices are going to be much higher. So there is a balance between housing and transportation.
For sure.
Cool. Well, let's cruise through the last one here. I know I have taxes on there. I'm not going to have you, you can guess for taxes, but I'll get to that in a moment. But other necessities are everything else that's required, right? For you to really be a modest but realistic worker in our community. That is not included in these other expenses. So we're not necessarily talking about recreation or saving for college. We're talking about the average monthly expenses of things like cell phone, toilet paper and toothpaste, clothes, any type of furniture, whatever the things are that you need in your household. We can internet, because really, like, realistically, to be a worker in our world, you need to have internet service in your household. And so what are the monthly expenses of all these other things that are not captured here, but are really kind of some basic necessities in our world today? And necessities can mean different things for different people, but anyone want to pop in some monthly totals for other necessities?
All right. So someone said between 75 and 100 additional dollars. Internet and phone alone, you're looking at $120 according to someone, up to $200, $400. I think it all depends on what's going on during that month too. What's happening in the world of an adult and a toddler during that month. Medication, things that pop up for school, internet and phone, of course, $450, $400. Those surprise, those surprise tires you have to buy. Oh my gosh. This was me in November. $300.
Right.
Yes. $300. Just I think of all these like pop-up expenses. That's what I'll call them, like pop-up expenses, things that
Mm-hmm.
happen. And you may not have budgeted for those things, but you know that you need to go ahead and cover the cost for those, because if it's the car and you need the car to get to work and the tires have done you dirty, then you
Right.
gotta you gotta get tires.
Right.
Oh, see, somebody was like, Rebecca, I get you. Rebecca was like, dang it, I gotta go get tires too. I'm with you, sis. We're right here. We're right here. But yeah,
Yeah,
so a lot of
and
different things.
also if you have a toddler in your household, you might need diapers. I think about
Diapers.
like, a lot of times we forget to calculate things like cleaning supplies, hygiene products, shampoo and conditioner, like all of those things that we use that aren't included, right, in these other costs. But like legit, I need those things, and certainly, like I said, cell phone and internet on its own can, be significant costs right there. But realistically, you have to have a cell phone to work to exist in this world right now. Um, so again, I'm not gonna. You don't necessarily need to guess on taxes. We're not gonna read through some of those guesses, but I wanted to make sure that taxes was included here, because some people forget that low income people pay taxes, right? And like in addition to income tax, even if you might get some, an earned income tax credit back or whatever, some of us, just finished our taxes and whatnot. We're all paying things like Social Security and all of those little things that come out of your check, and um, so so just remembering that taxes are involved. All right, we're going to go on to the next screen, and I'm going to show you a couple of different budgets, family budgets that are based on numbers from Mecklenburg County. All right, so the first column here where it says housing, 1028, food 298. This is from the North Carolina Justice Center's living income standards. The last time these were updated was 2019. They're updating them right now. It's now the NC Budget and Tax Center out of Raleigh, nonprofit that we work with. So these are average but modest but realistic costs in 2019 for one adult, one child in their household. And so you'll see kind of what some of those costs are. It seems like, we were saying between 1,000 and 1,500 for housing. So they were kind of on the low end there. And then, that's around 300 for food. For me, that feels low because, again, I feel like I'm spending $400 a month just for myself on food. Childcare, healthcare, again, only number that has gone down for me since I've done this exercise. Transportation, this for me really rings pretty close to true because I used to have my car payment was about $200 a month, and I spent about another $80 a month on insurance and some on gas. So that felt really right for me. But you'll see that the total they have there is $3,716 a month. I also put in this blue column. This blue column is what the MIT living wage calculator, which is another source, and this is 2022 numbers, or these numbers just came out. So some of the data is based from 2021. So MIT does a living wage calculator for every county across the country. And so these are Mecklenburg's. So again, these don't feel too off from some of the guesses. They're using some more current numbers than the Justice Centers in the first column. And they have around $5,080 a month. So if you were making enough to meet this budget and then meet all these taxes for the Justice Center, you would need to be making $21.43 an hour. And in order to meet MIT's living wage for one adult, one child, you would need to be making $29.30 an hour. Then I put this last column in here that's blank, right? And at the bottom, I have this total down here, $1,256 a month. This is what you make if you work full-time, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, never taking a single day off at minimum wage. Our minimum wage that has been stuck at $7.25 since 2009. Okay, and so these are people that are doing everything that society is telling you to do. Work hard, because low wage work is often very hard, difficult, challenging work. And yet they're not even making half of what is required to meet just these basic needs. And so oftentimes I'll challenge people to say, which of these do you give up? Because many times workers who are working for a minimum wage or slightly higher are kind of falling off the benefits cliff. They no longer qualify for housing subsidies or childcare subsidies. Their food stamps or our SNAP program is a graduated program right now. So the more you make, the less you qualify for. So they're not making enough to meet their basic needs, but they're making too much to qualify for different types of benefits. And this is why, and benefits that people are shamed and blamed for accessing. I know many of us have that experience, right, of being shamed and blamed for accessing public benefits, even if we've been working. That was certainly my experience living as a low wage worker. I also put $2,600 in parentheses over in that last column. That's how much you make if you work full-time, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, never taking a single day off, at $15 an hour. So you're a lot closer to meeting your basic needs. But even at $15 an hour, we're still not at what one adult, one child needs to make to be able to survive in 2019. In Mecklenburg County. And so oftentimes people are making choices between food and medicine, or living in inadequate or unsafe housing, or doubling up on housing, or trying to make creative solutions for their childcare issues, or having to use public transportation even when it's not reliable, or going without health care. And so these are the types of decisions that people have to make when they are not making enough to meet their basic needs. And for me, this exercise illustrates a lot of why we do the work that we do. And some of us have experiences trying to put this, third column budget together on a low income. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the minimum wage versus the living wage, and we're going to get to some questions here in just a few minutes. So again, the minimum wage is the lowest an employer can pay workers. It's $7.25 legally, at $7.25 an hour. But for tipped workers, and there's a long racially based history of the sub-minimum wage. For tipped workers, it's still $2.13 an hour. And really their tips plus their wages are supposed to meet at least $7.25. But tipped workers who are not, regularly averaging even the minimum wage have very little outlets to actually get that money. So just to name that, tipped workers can still be paid $2.13 an hour. And that's been, 30 plus years that it's been like that. The minimum wage started with the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938. And let me also say that the minimum wage was at its height in real value in 1968. Okay, so if you adjust for inflation, the minimum wage in 1968 would be, closer to, $13 an hour today, $12 and $13 an hour. And yet we're still at $7.25 in today's dollars. And so why are we not doing better for the future generations? We're taking steps backwards when you adjust for inflation. And again, that was last passed in 2009. So for me, and again, I don't have the experience of living in Mecklenburg County, but in Buncombe County in 2009, housing costs were significantly less, like half of what they were, so people having to pay double what they did in 2009, yet minimum wage has not risen with these costs. The idea of a living wage is that someone working full-time could afford to live on one job, one full-time job could afford to live and meet those basic needs. And again, a living wage is different for different people and depending on their family size. In Buncombe County, for our living wage certification program and for public policy that we pursue with our local governments, we define a living wage rate for a single individual. And the reason that we do that is we think that this is a better starting place. So in Buncombe County, our living wage rate is $17.70 an hour. And that's based on the idea that someone could afford a one-bedroom apartment somewhere in the Asheville metro area as determined by HUD, which is probably not Asheville because Asheville housing prices are out of control. And then be able to prove to their landlord that they make 3 times the rent, which is a common practice that landlords have. So again, we think 1770 is a bare minimum. And we use this, this different formula. MIT comes up with a very similar number, their number for Buncombe County for a single individual using a whole different methodology, using that kind of basic needs assessment. Their number is 1775. So we feel pretty good that 1770, 1775 right in there is a more just minimum than the minimum wage here in Buncombe County. So just to really kind of highlight what living wages are good for, certainly we all know that, or can imagine that, workers who are economically self-sufficient are happier and healthier. If you're making $15 an hour even, and can have one job versus someone who's making $7.25 and has to work 2 jobs and not even make that same amount, you're able to be healthier, get some more self-care and all of those things, and happier when you're closer to a living wage. We also know that businesses who pay a living wage see less turnover and save money on training and development, recruitment, retention. We're seeing that in, business owners often know that those costs are significant, and sometimes it's hard to see that up front, but living wages are an investment. We also see higher productivity because someone who has been on the job for 2 years because they haven't been looking for other jobs because they're paid a living wage, is much more productive than someone who's been on the job for 2 weeks. And so there's a business benefit to people paying a living wage. The community also benefits. When more people are making a living wage, it reduces any kind of strains on community supports and reduces poverty and all of poverty's associated problems. So if our nonprofits and government could really pour more money into the people who really need it, and more people are making a living wage and are self-sufficient, it provides better results for our community in general. And in general, the economy benefits because when low and middle income people have more money in their pockets due to living wages, they spend it in the local economy. I always say, low income people don't have Swiss bank accounts or foreign investments. They're spending their money at the local pizza shop or at another local retailer, business person, and or on rent and these other things. And so the entire community benefits when more people are making a living wage. There's more economic activity. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, I wanted to just talk about, again, because this is Stand Against Racism Month, I wanted to talk about both race and gender because wage scales historically have skewed towards white cis males, right? And have a long history of paying cisgendered white males more. And so if you look at these numbers or these graphs come from United for a Fair Economy. If you look at the median household income on the far left of the screen, we see that white income is $20,000 higher than Latinx income and $30,000 higher on average than Black income. So when we implement living wages more broadly, we are leveling the playing field and raising incomes for people of color. Same thing with women. Certainly historically, the gender pay gap that you can see there on the far left, or far right, I'm sorry, is has significantly been different for as long as this country exists. And that income is one thing, but income, when you have more income, you're able to generate more wealth, and wealth is often passed down. So wealth kind of accumulates and grows. And if you don't have anything to pass down to your next generation, we often forget that, capitalism is based on the idea of people having capital. We denied whole populations of people from access to capital. And so while white families had the ability to grow wealth, to pass capital down, to pass land, to pass houses, to pass, financial resources down, and we're making higher salaries to begin with, so they're able to pass down more. That white wealth has grown, and so you can see those extreme disparities in wealth. And wealth is really, all of your income and bank account and all of that minus everything that you owe, right? So wealth is important to note that, like, while income is kind of in the present, wealth is accumulated over time. But when we implement living wages, we get closer to a more just and sustainable economic community. All right, real quick, last slide, and then I'm going to get to some questions. So how can we be better advocates? How can we take action? First of all, we can work on public policy. So at the local level, here in North Carolina, we don't have the same ability to raise a local minimum wage, pass a citywide minimum wage like they do in places like San Francisco or Seattle. But we can have living wage policies that where our city and county stand out as lead employers and set an example for other employers and pay their workers a living wage. We also have the ability to influence statewide minimum wage. We have 29 other states that have a higher minimum than the federal, and North Carolina is not one of them. And we have several states that are either on a path to 15 or at 15. And then, of course, there's the federal campaign to raise the minimum wage, and campaigns working to raise the minimum wage, as well as other policies that impact worker justice, things like paid family leave, which was something that was part of the Build Back Better plan initially. So public policy, we can engage in public policy. Doesn't matter what party you come from or belong to, if any, but we can all support public policy to raise the minimum wage and to affect economic justice in our communities. Second, living wage certification. So again, Just Economics has the largest voluntary living wage employer certification program in the country. And we have a network. There isn't a local program that I know of in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, but there is a new national program called livingwageforus.org. So, or Living Wage for Us, their website is livingwageforus.org. And you can kind of go on there and see how businesses can become certified in Charlotte and Mecklenburg. They look at a living wage based on a family's need over the commuter zone, as they refer to it, and will certify businesses. And certainly if you're a business owner and you know a business owner, you can encourage them to become living wage certified. And then if you are, as consumers, we can support businesses that are supporting the type of economic community we want to live in. And then finally, supporting worker-led movements as community members. There's a lot of worker organizing happening right now. Starbucks workers are organizing for better wages and working conditions. Amazon workers nationally are organizing. Locally, there's lots of organizing happening among workers and worker-led movements. And so here in North Carolina, we have Raise Up North Carolina, and lots of other organizations. So we can support them and find out how they're working to move economic security forward, move living wages forward. And then also helping to debunk myths. We have a lot of old myths that stem from old and false narratives in our community about poverty, about people living on a low income, about wages and minimum wage. And we can help educate ourselves. Y'all being here tonight is part of educating yourselves to become ambassadors for really right and true information. And I know we want to honor your time today, and I've kind of babbled on for a while here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in just a second and open it up for any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vicki. So right now we have one question in the chat box. And like we say, and we've said in the beginning of our session, along with throughout the session, please drop those questions in the Q&A section, and just let us know if you have any questions about anything that may have sparked your interest or you want to learn more about. So our first question is, they want to know about the advocacy efforts that helped to make those changes in Buncombe County.
Yeah, so we have worked to advance living wage policies with the city of Asheville and Buncombe County that required them to pay their workers a living wage. We're continuing to have that fight because our living wage is going up, and so we're continuing to have that fight. But we have engaged with people, with community, with people most impacted, with low wage workers, and with people from all ends of the income spectrum, people of economic privilege, low wage workers, to write city council, to bring data to city council, to the county commission, to meet with counselors, to work together to form a campaign. And when we form a campaign, we say, what do we want? Who can give us what we want, and how are we going to get it? And we really make a clear strategy on trying to move that forward. And so those three things seem like simple questions, but sometimes our campaign work might take us, a year to figure out, and developing those strategies to move that forward. We also do some local advocacy with business owners, and really sit down with business owners to talk through the benefits of paying a living wage, both in that kind of saving in terms of training and development, recruitment, retention, all of that, as well as increasing their conscious consumer base for paying a living wage.
Great. Awesome answer. Hopefully whoever asked that question is able to kind of get some information from that, glean some information from that. We have probably about 2 or 3 more questions, actually. Sure. We had one pop up in our Q&A section. Thank you for utilizing the Q&A section. Renee asked, how can we influence and encourage employers to get on board with the need to consider the benefits of a living wage?
Yeah, so again, in Asheville and Buncombe County, and actually in large parts of Western North Carolina, we have, through our certification program, we've been able to talk to employers and really kind of meet employers where they are, and really talk from a moral and community perspective on what it means to pay a living wage, but then also talk from a business perspective, because business owners do know that saving in terms of training and development, like I said, recruitment, retention, productivity, all of that are things that, you know, we've seen data wise nationally, but we've also heard anecdotally from our businesses here that have become certified. And now there is this national certification program, so I think that there's that, and that kind of can set a number. So I think just kind of meeting employers where they are and talking to them, and also understanding that a lot of small employers in our community, they're struggling right now as well, trying to maintain and keep their business solvent, as COVID has created challenges for different businesses and different industries. So also recognizing that, a work towards that is also beneficial to the community. It's more beneficial than a multinational corporation coming in and taking their place, one that isn't invested in our community and doesn't really know the needs of our community members.
Awesome. All right, so our next question was, how do we compel nonprofits to overcome the fear of lack in the budget to give their own workers living wage?
Yeah, that's challenging. As a nonprofit myself, and, I often talk about that when I'm talking to employers, to government, that we're a living wage organization, but also I'm an employer. I have staff, and our grants, our funding isn't always going up at the same rate that inflation is, and certainly not at the same rate of the cost of housing. So I would say that that's challenging, but I would also say that, like, what are the costs of not doing this? First of all, is what we're doing in this community, are we being true to our own values that we are putting out to the community? If we are saying that, we are caring for the community, if we're working on housing, but our workers can't afford to live in the county that they work, what is that saying? And so I think it is challenging, again, with employers, with nonprofits, coming into those conversations with a bit of grace and understanding from their perspective that, budgets are difficult, and there's an economic system that has oppressed and put a lot of problems on lots of different folks. And, people sometimes ask us, are you on the side of businesses or on the side of workers? And I say we're on the side of a just economy, and both businesses, nonprofits, and workers can all be on the side of a just economy. And so that's where we come from. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have another question. As a new small business owner, are there federal or county resources that they could have access to?
So I'm not 100% sure what we mean by resources. I know that, there is this national living wage certification program. There are resources a lot of times in our local communities for businesses to, to look at everything from, their budgets and whatnot. And so when we're putting living wages as a value set and trying to seek out resources, I'm not sure what's available at the local level. I would say that there's probably more at the local level than there is at the federal level. And I apologize that I'm not familiar with your Mecklenburg County business resources, but yeah, I wish I could help you out there a little bit more.
Thank you. And yeah, definitely check out some of the websites that Vicki suggested to probably get additional information on that, and possibly becoming certified as a nonprofit, or not as a nonprofit, but as a small business, as one that pays employees a living wage. So I think that's a good resource to go to. somebody actually asked about seeing the cost of living sheet again. I'm assuming the budget sheet so that they can get an idea of what that looked like.
I'm happy to go back in that, but I also just put in the chat that those numbers came from the MIT Living Wage Calculator, which you can just Google MIT Living Wage Calculator and go to Mecklenburg County. And the other ones came from the North Carolina Justice Center, and you can type into their search bar living income standards. I'm happy to pop that back up, but I know we're almost running out of time. So you can go ahead and ask me another question and I can, I'm not sure I can pop that back up. I could also feel free to, I can send that out over email, or Jamila, I can send it to you and we can send it out, because I know I want to honor people's time. Yeah, but you can definitely see those different things and all of their methodology behind that.
Definitely. You can send it to me and I'll send it tomorrow to everybody with our post-event email. And so we had a question. Can you tell us a story about shifting someone's perspective about the issue? What did you think was most effective?
That's a great question. And I think that for me, the experiences that we've had at Just Economics, and I of course have a staff, so I'm not always the one talking to businesses or to the community or whatnot. But you know, I would say, first of all, just kind of listening to people and trying to hear what they're saying first and not kind of coming at them something. But one quick story I'll say, and I know it's 7, I'm just going to go over just a minute or so, Jamila, but is that we do something called a poverty simulation, and it's a 2-hour experiential learning exercise to help people understand the challenges and difficulties of living on a low income. And they're given a profile of a family living on a low income, and then they have things they have to do in this kind of movable exercise, go to these different stations, pay different bills, and whatnot. And I had someone who came to me afterwards and said, I am someone that believes in following the rules, and I thought I always was I'm open-minded and I care about low-income people, but I'm a stickler on the rules and I don't like people who break the law. And there was a rule we had in this poverty simulation where, you had to, if you didn't have a car and you were trying to get somewhere, you had to go and circle this thing 3 times and walk heel to toe and all of this stuff. And he said, so I found myself that, you mentioned, oh, you better pick up your kids from childcare. And so I only circled the thing 1 time, because I had to get my kid from childcare. And so he had this revelation of I broke the rules because I had to take care of my kid. And so his revelation was how many people living on a low income have I judged for breaking the rules, or, whatever that might be. And they only broke that rule because they had to take care of their kid. And so that was just something that was a time where I felt like someone's heart was really changed. And sometimes when I talk to people, there are people that we're just not going to change their mind. They'll show up to a conversation with the decision made that this isn't a conversation. This is me standing my ground and arguing and making my case. But then there's some people that will show up to the conversation, and if we listen to them and can lead with grace and also an understanding, and think about what they care about and make the different arguments and try to come without judgment, but also and be informed, what is some of the data, because some people will spout back myths and old narratives that are false back at you, and so being armed with correct and updated data and information to gently and gracefully combat myths, I think is how to best approach people.
Yes, thank you. A lot of people are saying, wow, they have done a similar simulation before, or just thank you for sharing that powerful story, because it's true. You don't really understand the reason why, living wage is so important, or any kind of issue is so important to others, unless you really take a second to be open to hearing the information and becoming more educated on the topic, and actually kind of thinking from the perspective of somebody that may be living in that experience currently. So you really, really get a better understanding as to why it is important to try to make a change, and let's make a shift. So I just want to say thank you so much, Vicki. That was our last question. That's the last question we have time for today. But of course, you guys are all welcome to contact Vicki. Vicki, if you could just drop your email in the chat if you feel comfortable to do so. Reach out to her if you have any additional questions. I'll be sending an email tomorrow with some additional resources that Vicki's actually shared with me. And I will gladly send that information to you all as well. Thank you again to our YWCA staff, those folks that are logged in, those folks that work together to really just get this to where it is today. Thank you to Claire, she's a ghost right now. And thank you to our sponsors, Corning and Google Fiber, for, as always, supporting our racial justice and advocacy work that we do year round. And of course, if you all are able, please join us next week for our last Stand Against Racism virtual event, which is our doulas, midwives, and much more, where we'll talk about the historical relevancy of doulas and midwives when it comes to racial justice and reproductive justice, with an amazing panel. Just like this was amazing, next week's going to be amazing too. So please tune if you can. Claire just dropped the registration in the chat as well. So I hope to see all of you all very soon. Thank you again, Vicki. You all stay safe.
Thank you so much, Jamila, and thank you all for joining us tonight and your interest in this topic. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, so definitely stay engaged with this topic, you all. Do the research, contact those folks in office, contact your local officials about the topic, and connect with those small businesses that are actually doing the work. Patronize them. So thank you all again, and have a great and safe night. Thank you again, Vicki. You're the best. I appreciate you all so much. Good night.